Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Space for Magic podcast. My guest today is someone that if you have read Make Space for Magic, you probably already know and might be very curious about because he played a featured role in the book, and his story has been one that I have held close to my heart, not just because he is a good friend of mine, but just because his journey of opening to all of this woo crazy shit, probably as he would describe it, has been completely awesome. I will give you his professional background first. Lou Bortone has been a pioneer and thought leader in the video space since the launch of YouTube in 2005. And I can attest to that. Before Lou and I became friends, I think we met at a live event years ago. When I first broke into the digital space and was asking people for resources and people to watch that could teach and that I could learn from, Lou was at the top of everyone's list. To this day, the video kit that I use, or the lighting kit I use, came from his cheat sheet. Up until a year ago, I was using the mic he recommended to me. I mean, everything that got me started on video came from Lou. He is a master of not just teaching it and exemplifying it, but really translating it for the every person. And I think that that's really his gift. Before he was in this space, he spent 20 years as a marketing executive in the television and entertainment industries, including stints as national promotion manager for E! Entertainment Television and senior vice president of marketing for Fox Family Worldwide in Los Angeles. Lou is a popular speaker, author, and ghostwriter of 6 business books. Lou, I didn't know that you were a ghostwriter. Okay, we're going to have to get into that. So, I'm going to leave the rest of his official bio to the side and just say that Lou exemplifies to me what it looks like to have a true growth mindset, to keep going through life and really have structures and ideas that work for you, and then yet be willing to learn something new. So, Lou, with that, my dear friend, welcome.
Thanks, Patty. Great to see you, and thank you for the lovely introduction. I mentioned before we came on the Bezos law, which is like Murphy's law, but it's like basically as soon as we got to record anything, the dog's going to lose their shit. And right on cue, they did, but hopefully you can't hear them too much back going wild.
Yeah. And Bezos, because Amazon will deliver, and that is why the dogs will. I just wanted to loop the whole circle around so people understood the full
Amazon,
law.
I think they wait until Lou's online and doing something live. Let's go deliver something and knock on the door so the dogs will go nuts.
I love that. Well, we welcome your little munchkins to share their wisdom with us as well. So let me just start with, I think it's always interesting when someone has a level of success. I mean, for people listening, you had a pretty interesting level of success in a world that most people find fascinating and kind of don't understand it and really don't know it. And so what is it that made you leave, kind of that big studio entertainment and go out on your own?
I may have had a mini stroke and I wasn't thinking straight or something. I'm, in the corner office on the 23rd floor overlooking the Pacific Ocean, going in the corporate jet and all that. I'm like, oh, I think I'll go back to New Hampshire and work in radio again. It's like probably temporary insanity, but honestly, because it was my twins were 2 years old and it was time for them to grow up around family and go back and be closer to my mom and dad as they were getting older. So I just kind of traded it in and decided to, do something a little different.
I love that because I think, it's so interesting that you bring up that, and I want to ask you a question about that specifically. But before I do, I want to kind of couch it with some conversations I've been having, which is from people, you and I are in the entrepreneur space. And if you're listening, you don't need to be in this space. I just want to kind of give you some context that in the space that Lou and I kind of play in, and where you're constantly hearing messages from the digital marketing world, there's this underlying conversation or hypnosis that the most important thing is how much money you make and your visibility and your prestige. And you would think that Hollywood or California entertainment maybe isn't considered Hollywood. I don't know, maybe I'm even using words that don't relate to you, Lou, but for me, big banks, the obsession with how much money I make and my visibility and blah, blah, blah for anyone, I think it's so much worse in what we do than in anything we left behind. What do you think?
It is. It's like it's almost like this bro culture of like, oh, okay, the guy's got to be standing next to his Maserati with his mansion behind it. 99% of the time, it's all staged in smoke and mirrors anyway. Just like Hollywood is like, so what? It's a set. It's window dressing.
It is. And these are the conversations I've been having with, people that have said to me, oh, I feel like because I'm going to go back and do something that I used to do 2 or 3 years ago that makes money to like kind of, cover cash flow needs or whatever, that somehow I'm, like failing in some way or should be ashamed. And yet the crazy thing is, because I've been on all sides of the financial spectrum, I've talked about it here, I've been huge in debt, is that, yeah, the debt sucks like big time, but there are some things that really are the foundation of happiness, and they are your relationships. They are your body's ability to move itself around, like your health. There's just so many things that really on a daily basis do actually affect how happy you are. And your kids growing up around family, I think is such, it's not one that I'm saying for you if you're listening and you didn't do this that I'm criticizing you, but I think that's such a important decision you made. And yet it's not something that gets highlighted. And I just want to give you like so much kudos for making a choice that was right for your family. But now I would say there was sort of like a tinge of maybe regret when you start to talk about it. So maybe talk about like, yeah, where
It
do you,
was. I mean, it was a big trade off, and you know me, and I do not like cold weather. So living in Southern California was glorious. But at the end of the day, it's like I'm not gonna sacrifice my kids' future or their chance to grow up around family just to live in nice weather and make a lot of money. So I mean, there's always you always sort of second guess, but looking back, it's like no, I wouldn't change anything. I left it at just the right time, and living and having the kids grow up in southern New Hampshire where we live was great, and they got to be around family, and I got to be around for the last 10 or so years of my parents' life, which is you certainly can't trade anything on that. So
yeah, yeah. And for those of you who, maybe aren't, you don't know Lou because you don't have the same privilege I do. When you're around Lou, Lou is just a very lovable person. So it's just, you're just very grateful to be in his life. So I'm sure your family was also super grateful to get you back, especially your parents.
yeah, it was that's really the reason I came back was like I was a little after 10 years in Hollywood land. I was a little homesick, and the timing was just right. So and like you say, it's like I look back now that my parents are gone. I'm like I never would have traded those last few years for anything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about receiving and maybe the more woo side of the stuff that you and I have worked on in recent years. I mean, for the most part, our relationship, I've known you as a video expert, and that's where the context of our relationship has been. But you're kind enough to have the courage to join the receiving school when it first opened. And I often talk about you as being the most cynical person really that had come into it. And not because you're as a whole cynical, but this is just not your shtick, right?
right.
So
And I'm, like I'm Italian. I grew up in sort of a tough town, and had all this mobster sort of semi upbringing, and like the woo thing was about as far away from that as you could get from growing up in Medford, Mass, the mob capital of New England. But I will say this, you know, um, after I met you, like I had my kids making vision boards, so I was sort of like a closet
mm,
woo person. Like when they were younger, I would have them make vision boards. and stuff like that. So, but I certainly wouldn't advertise it. Now I'm kind of like, yes, received, take universe, thank you. So,
And so I want to talk about something that comes up a lot, and I think it's something that a lot of people are resistant to, which is, a big part of receiving is resting for most people, because we are such a productivity addicted culture
yeah,
that most people need to slow down and stop to make space for the universe to sort of catch up to all of the asking they've done.
right.
And so I don't even know if it was in receiving school or it was just you and I talking, but I had put that out to you. And could you just share a little bit about what your
Yeah, I think it was right around the time of receiving school. I got in touch with you because you are, as I like to say, my spiritual consigliere, my go-to person on all things woo and spiritual. And I said, Patty, I don't know what's going on, but nothing's working. The things that worked a few months ago didn't work. I'm losing my mind. I'm losing money. Nothing's working. And you said, well, why don't you just shut everything down for a little while? And I was like, are you nuts? Because my whole thing is like, oh, if it's not working, work harder, work faster, work more. And you were basically saying, just go offline, shut down, do what I guess now is called the digital detox. And if it was anybody but you saying it, I would have said you're nuts. But I actually did that, and it was life changing.
and what do you think? Well, talk about what was life changing for you.
What I did after you told me to shut everything down was I basically, I think you said a month, and I may have taken 2 weeks instead of a month, but I basically kind of went offline, and they have this thing called getaway.house, which is like these little cabins in the woods outside big cities. So I went there, and the whole idea there was just to completely unplug, kind of get back to nature. I think the Japanese call it forest bathing, and just basically get away from all the day-to-day craziness. And I went up there with a couple of loose leaf notebooks and a pen, and that's pretty much all I had. No iPhone, no internet, no nothing. And it was just, oh my God, Patty was right.
I,
She's crazy, but she was right.
yeah, she is crazy. I mean, gosh, that's like my husband says that on a regular basis. She's crazy, but she's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
And y'all, for you listening, oh my goodness, Lou had posted a picture of this like tiny house that he was going to be staying in. And I was like, dang, I don't know. That could go either way. That's what I'm thinking. That could go either way. And it went the right
yeah,
way.
exactly. So, you get off, you get away from the noise, you get away from online, you get away from, oh my God, I have to be popular on Facebook and my thing didn't get 30 likes. And just basically, it's me and the outdoors and no online and no nothing. And it's just a great way to totally basically reset. It's like rebooting your system.
I love that. I love that. You are a story I tell many, many times. And so then fast forward, I want to say like probably a good solid year and a half. Um, we were working together. And again, I don't know if it was just that we were talking privately, or I think were you maybe it doesn't really matter, but your grandfather came through, right? And
Oh yeah, yeah.
so talk about like what that was like for you to like, so it's one thing to trust me by, okay, Patty, I need to rest. It's another
Yeah.
thing to start to understand that you're being guided by your grandfather from the other side of the veil.
Yeah, and again, like I think you alluded to the fact that I was the poster child for cynicism and disbelief, and part of it again is when you grow up in New England, I think you're cynical to begin with. So, um, so when you started talking about your grandfather wants you to do this, or I see him, I feel him. I went to ancestry.com after you did that and started to look into it a little bit. And I'm like, oh my God, he is like my guide, my spirit. I mean, he arrived in America on my birthday, March 14th, 1900 something. And I'm named after him. And like, it just didn't occur to me that was like oh my God, this is the link back to my roots, back to my soul, back to my, homeland, so to speak, in Italy. So it was amazing when you sort of opened me up to that. A lot of very interesting and cool things started happening.
What I love is that, first of all, you don't have to actually talk to an ancestor, like, have a very tangible experience of them like you did to, like you said, you looked at ancestry. Like, you could have kind of conceptually known he was out there and that he conceptually might be willing to help you. And what I want to say for those of you listening is you all have these ancestors. They are cheering so hard for you. Um, Lou, can you talk a little bit about maybe some things you might have done differently because, or felt differently because now you knew you had this person from the,
Right.
from this ancestor that was sort of, you know, had an opinion, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he was like a scary, scary guy, like a total hard ass. He had 13 kids. And the interesting thing is, it wasn't until me and my brother and the grandkids came along, finally softened him up. But once you sort of opened me up to that, I would basically say, what would Luchito do? My grandfather's name was Luchito, and I'm the American version of that, named after him and my dad. Um, so I look back and say, like, all right, this guy grew up. He got through the Depression with 13 kids, and what would so he's sort of like my hard ass saint. Like, okay, this guy's the sort of tough guy, but underneath he's really a softie. So that just helps me with a different perspective on how to look at things, and also helps me to not panic, because when I realize, oh my God, I had a terrible May or whatever, I made half as much as I did last month. I think back to, like, what, he got through a lot worse shit than I did with a lot of kids, and turned out okay. So um, I don't know. I'm just constantly amazed the more I learn about him, because he passed away when I was maybe 10 years old. So it's almost been able to, like, oh, I get to reconnect and learn from his experience, and just the whole thing is just opened up a whole new world of stuff, writing and videos and creativity, and I mean, it's just almost like, oh my God, I've got a whole new world here of things to explore.
And you're so already so amazing at, like, for your clients, seeing for them what's possible for them with video and, like, really, like, way showing in that way already. That just, like, amazes me that that could even grow more. And because you just are such a powerhouse where that is concerned. Are there any things you do differently now in your work and the way that you work with clients, or the way you work with your even family or personal friends?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fiercely loyal to them, and just that's the one trait that really came from that family and that Italian background is loyalty. Um, and I do a whole thing, like, I've got a whole different kind of side of my business for writing and speaking that's about loyalty and the Godfather and all these lessons from sort of from Italy and the mafia, but not necessarily all the violent stuff. It's really more about honor and loyalty and integrity. So I just try to bring that now more than ever to everything that I do. And it's also given me an opportunity to um, basically be a little bit more selfish, in terms of, like, this year I went to Italy for 3 weeks and just said, I'm going, you guys deal with it. So stuff like that.
I love that you just brought that up because that was the next place I wanted to go, because I have talked here about Ireland calling its children home,
Hmm.
because I am, that's where my ancestors are from. And people can be called back to a country not just because your blood, your DNA ancestors were from there, but it could be past life stuff.
Hmm.
For you, though, I see you are the most alive when you're back in Italy or thinking about Italy. At least that's my observation of you over the years. Do you think that?
Yeah, and I've been a few times, and the first time I went, like, was with my whole family, and the kids were little, and I'm like, oh my God, I just feel so at home and so at ease here. Like, I really, part of me is just there, and then that's why I would start to do retreats and bring other people there, and I don't know, I just felt like there's nothing I would never do a retreat like in in New York City or in Boston, because it's just too scary for me. Like, I'm an introvert, I don't want the responsibility. But if I say, oh, okay, we're going to go rent a villa, and I'm going to bring 10 people over there and keep them happy and engaged and learning stuff for a week, then that's totally fine, because it's Italy.
And I'm going to put some words in your mouth. You can push back on what's not true, but don't you think maybe it's because Italy is your real home, like it's your blood home? So then you have almost the support of your motherland.
Yeah. It's like having a little superpower. Like, if Superman's in wherever he comes from, it's like, I'm a lot stronger and more confident and sort of almost invincible there. And I, I kind of joke that, like, I don't know if I was a gladiator or a Roman whatever in a past life, but there's something about walking on that ground that just connects me to everything.
Oh, I love that. So, one of the big things I wanted you to help our audience with is, for someone that feels like they're the more cynical person when it comes to creating space for magic, whether it's resting or connecting to um your spirit guides or your ancestors, or even trusting that there is a force that is not your human effort, that's helping you. What advice would you give people that feel like they're still kind of stuck in their doubt?
hmm Well, I mean, we always say, like in receiving school, trust the process, right? You have to give yourself up to that and open your mind to that. And for somebody that was closed-minded and cynical, and I love sarcasm and biting wit and all that kind of thing. So I had to just bite my tongue and just you know um, open yourself up to the possibilities. Just believe it. And I was so ingrained, with, like I said, my parents were, came from the Depression era, and they would just work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard. And it's like, well, and they were almost, a little bit like, society is plotting against us. Everybody's against us. And I just thought, like, skipping a generation and going to my grandfather. It's like, well, what if everything is actually conspiring for you instead of against you? Like, what if you can just assume that there's somebody out there looking over you and looking after you, and everything's going to be okay.
Oh, I love that. I love that, Lou.
There must be an opposite, whatever the opposite word is, of conspiracy. It's like, okay, well, there's a conspiracy of goodness happening for you too.
That is awesome. So, let's switch gears a little, because one of the things I'm curious if this is something you have now a better awareness of, since this kind of work, or maybe you just have insight, period, is so a lot of the work you do is really helping uh, thought leaders, entrepreneurs become more visible via the medium of video. I mean,
Yeah.
is that a
Mhm.
fair assessment?
Yeah, and it's the way I see it is sort of like, I know a lot of my clients are the best kept secret in their niche, and I don't want them to be. They don't want them to be the best kept secret anymore.
Yeah. And do you think that part of that is the way we grow up, all of us, it's still connected to this receiving piece of you have to be willing to be seen and receive, like sort of receive what comes with that, the good and the bad, right? Because receiving school, we talk about the good and the bad. And I'm curious if, as you now, like through the lens of that, if when you're working with your clients, if you're starting to notice anything that's shifted, maybe because of the pandemic, maybe because I really do think values have changed somewhat.
Yeah, and the other thing with the pandemic is, like, in basically the span of, I don't know, 24 hours, we had to all go from in person to online, and video and Zoom and everything else became much, much more important. I mean, Zoom meetings went up by like 8,000% or some crazy thing. Um, and that was not necessarily a bad thing for me, because some of what I teach is for people to have confidence on camera and just to embrace the medium, and embracing the medium of, like, oh my God, I've got to talk to a little green light on a camera or a person on a screen. That, talk about receiving and opening yourself up to something. You really have to trust the process when it comes to video.
Yeah, yeah. And I think when you're an entrepreneur, it's very hard to step into that space without at least understanding a little bit. You have to be on some kind of stage, like even if it's just the stage of your website. But I think way beyond that, lots of people had to embrace video just for the reasons you said. What would you offer as advice to be able to kind of settle into that medium, or
It's like a muscle, like, same with receiving school. I have to start to actually work my receiving muscle. I have to work my openness muscle. It's like, okay, well, you got to work your put yourself out there muscle, your video muscle. whether it's podcasts or videos or stages or whatever it may be. It's like we're not going back to the old way, for better or worse. So we really have to embrace and take on this new way of engaging and communicating. Because even if even if the pandemic totally goes away, which who knows if it ever will, we're not going back. We're not going back to that way. Like you said, it's been a societal shift, and in some ways good, because like, okay, now we have to learn how to engage over the internet, engage online, engage with video, and we're not, you don't have to be Kim Kardashian to be on screen all the time. Thank God.
Yes. TG for that one. So if you had a magic wand, what do you wish for everyone that is faced with having a video presence? Like with the people that really resist it, what would you wish for them?
Yeah, it's kind of like a book. It's like, don't die with that book or that message inside you. You have an obligation almost to get that out into the world. And if before it's like, okay, well, I can go on a stage and 100 people in the audience can see it. Now you can go on YouTube and 100,000 people can see it, and you don't have to leave your office. So it's an enormous opportunity. I mean, I grew up, I'm way older than you, when three television networks controlled everything that you saw and heard. And now, even with the advent of cable, and I worked in that whole business, it's like you're a TV network. You have more reach than any big broadcaster or CNN or whatever. You can reach hundreds of thousands of people on video and online.
There's a couple of things I want to comment on. One was just sort of like something that float what you were just saying. When I was people like will ask like, "Oh, why'd you leave for me corporate banking?" And I have a story that really is the core of it, but you just reminded me of something, which is I was an English major, so every once in a while I would keep re-stepping into like, what would an English major do, right? And I pull out some work. And so I was reading Thoreau at the time, and I read a quote, which I later think I've heard that should not be attributed to Thoreau, but it was most men lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the ground with the song still in them. And that really hearing that was like kind of what made me leave banking. That just broke my heart. And what you just said feels like that a little bit is that, yeah, there's this, you're kind of got this medium between you and the rest of the world, but it's just like if you can kind of shift your relationship to it.
Right. Yeah, it's the whole thing. It's resistance versus acceptance, like you do in receiving school. It's like, well, you just open yourself up to it. And I mean, the one good thing about the pandemic is that, we all had to just basically go online and figure out how to do this, and I know for women it's harder than men. It's like, oh my God, I'm having a bad hair day. It's like, nobody cares. They need your message and they need your expertise, and don't deprive them of that.
So now I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit and give you like sort of the counter of that, the counter concern I have my kids are younger than yours, which I see with my daughter and her friends who tend to have an activist nature about themselves. The fact that they can flip on their phone, I was going to say flip open their phone, but nobody flips open their phone anymore. Patty, the early 2000s, yes, the early 2000s have called. They want their phone back. But now that they have that they have, Greta Thunberg's as their sort of aspirational mentors, people to look up to, as opposed to someone much older than them, I see that they put a lot of pressure on themselves to be present in video and be on like sharing their thoughts. And the thing I tell them is there's going to be a time for that. Like, and you got to figure out who you are first before you start trying to influence the world. Do you have any thoughts on what you see out there with like younger people and
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure, because they do have the reach, which can kind of cut either way. But um, I know with my kids, like my daughter, it's like she'd have to approve a photo before we put it on Instagram or something. And I'm like, and I even fall into that too. It's like, oh, I want my real life to be as good as my Facebook life, you know. So it's something to be cautious of, but I think that they're savvy enough, having grown up with a phone in their hand, that they're going to be able to navigate it all. And I think the pluses outweigh the minuses, because you do have somebody like, it's like, I don't want to get too much into politics, but it's like, okay, if the country's going to shit, the only thing that's going to save it is a bunch of 18-year-olds with iPhones.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. You're right about that. Um, so, so now I know you have awesome free resources out there. And before we go any further, I do want to say, if you're listening and you would like to be like I was, where I found Lou very early, and you are interested in getting resources, in stepping into your video presence, I highly recommend you follow him. And if you go to pattylennon.com/Lou video, so LOUVIDEO, we're going to put the link in the show notes. You will get connected with Lou and an awesome free resource. Lou, can you just describe what they are going to get?
Yeah, thanks. Most folks just don't know where to start with video, or they're intimidated by it, or like, oh my God, I've got to have this or that. And I just have a planner that's basically like a one sheet. I'm like, no, you don't have to do 100 things. You have to do these 4 things, and they're really simple. And once you understand how to do it, it's going to be like second nature. So it just basically helps you get started with video and put yourself out.
I love that. I think up until about 2 years ago, like while we were in isolation, I was like really doing a lot of cleansing of like paper files, because oh my God, who keeps paper files anymore? Patty does. And I still had that original PDF that I got from you, Lou, that said like your 5-step process to setting up your own personal video studio. And like I had held on to that because I would copy it and give it to people and all of that.
And the technology will change, but the idea of connecting is really what it is at its core. So don't even worry about the technology; just worry about making connections.
Yes. Yeah. And to that point, I mean, when you think about it, Lou, like you put this free offer out into the world that I had gotten. And, I didn't know you personally. I didn't meet you for a couple of years, but you always stayed top of mind because you had given me this super clear, easy, simple help that felt in a world that felt so overwhelming. And then, you know, so much has come from our relationship since then. So I'm so grateful for you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And yeah, that's the whole thing. It's just about, and I thought the same thing when I started. It's like, oh, there are other people doing this. What do I possibly have to offer that hasn't been offered already? And I'm like, well, I can put my spin on it, and I can do the cynical, sarcastic version or whatever. So yeah, no matter what your message is, you've got a point of view. So share it.
I love that. Well, definitely, if you have a business, if you're looking to influence people on video via the video medium, go to pattylennon.com/Lou video. And any last words of wisdom on anything we talked about today, Lou?
Oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack. I think it's really just, like I said, I keep coming back to trust the process, whether it's receiving school or connecting with your spirit guides. And even the fact that I never would have said the word spirit and guide ever in a conversation before I met you. So, you just got to kind of trust, basically.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here with us, Lou. I adore you. Everyone listening, go check Lou out. He is someone you should know, period. Just follow him in the world because he has his own voice that is so unique. I won't go into some of the the stronger parts of Lou's voice, but he has a strong opinion and you will know what it is when you follow him. Where would you like people to follow you, Lou?
Uh, I'm at Lou Bortone on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the socials, and loubortone.com.
I love it. All right, everyone, have a wonderful week. Make space for magic. And Lou, I adore you. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty.